The LG G4 is LG's new flagship smartphone for 2015, and boy am I impressed. Overall, it's an incredible phone with amazing build quality and one of probably the best smartphone camera I've ever seen. But is it a DSLR replacement as they're suggesting? We'll get to that in a little bit. The G4 sports a 2560 by 1440 Quad HD Quantum IPS display, which differs from Samsung's new display on the Galaxy S6. With the LG G4, I no longer think that Samsung is king of smartphone displays. That may change next year, but with the LG G4 versus the S6, it is a lot closer than anybody probably would have thought. Not to mention that high resolution at a 5.5-inch display makes for some really awesome pixel density, and it looks really bright, really clear, and really crisp, and I really like it. It's a lot of reallys. It has a 3000 milliamp hour battery, which is replaceable via the removable back. It can take microSD cards up to 2 terabytes, although if you find a 2 terabyte microSD card, let me know what the price is, because they're probably very expensive, and I don't see anyone putting one of those in their smartphone, but it supports it. And this is kind of a rarity nowadays, as everybody's moving to the fully enclosed phone with a metal back, which may do this phone some justice, but I'll touch on that in a minute. But you can fully replace the battery, and they actually have a temporary program going on their website till like mid-June or something, to where if you buy the phone through them, you actually get an extra battery and back for it. So that's pretty cool. It sports a Snapdragon 808 processor and a Adreno 418 graphics processor with 3 gigs of RAM, and mine comes with 16 gigabytes of storage, but they do go up to 32 gigabytes as well in separate models. And then we get to the cameras. There are two. There's one on the front, which is actually worth talking about for once, and then one on the back, which just blows everybody away. It features an f1.8 aperture camera lens. It is a 16 megapixel sensor, which makes it almost as high resolution as my DSLR that I'm recording this video on. And then it comes with laser autofocus and a color spectrum sensor for managing the white balance and the colors and things like that. And it does a really, really good job. The photos on this thing are absolutely amazing. And if you step it into manual mode, you can take some really, really good pictures as if you're recording on a DSLR as well. The front-facing camera is an 8 megapixel sensor, which is about half of the back sensor, of course, but that's still a really good sensor for a front camera, and it takes pretty decent pictures. It's meant to be a selfie camera. You don't need DSLR quality selfies. If you do, I question you, but it does the job, and it does it pretty well in my opinion. We're going to talk more about the camera in just a minute when we get to the software things, but finishing up the product tour here, on the front we have the 5.5-inch display, LG branding, speakerphone speaker, front-facing camera, and LED. On the top you have an IR sensor, I believe, as well as a noise reduction mic. On the bottom you have the microphone, headphone jack, and micro USB port for charging. On the back you have the removable back, which is plastic, the volume up, volume down button, as well as the power button, which are actually located below the camera. The camera, laser autofocus, and the color spectrum sensor. The sides are perfectly clear of buttons or dials or sensors or anything other than the little slot with which you can remove the back of the phone. There's also a speaker on the back. Unfortunately, it's one and it's on the back, and it's not that great quality. It gets decently loud, but it doesn't sound very good, and it's super easy to cover. I'm covering it with my pinky right now. Two major gripes about the build quality of this phone, because overall I think the build quality is absolutely amazing, but I have two major gripes with it. The back speaker is on the back for one, and it's really small, and it's not that great quality. I would obviously front-facing speakers are kind of the rage nowadays because they're objectively a lot better, and this one is kind of sad. But I don't honestly do a lot of media playing through a speaker on my smartphone, so that personally doesn't impact me very much, but I know it drives some people absolutely mad. Second is that the removable back, while being there and being an amazing option, is made of plastic. It's got this interesting little diamond texture pattern to it that you can kind of feel and see if you look close enough, but it is still plastic, and it feels kind of cheap. I mean, it feels like premium plastic, but compared to the rest of the sleek metal and serious business build style, it feels kind of cheap. And I would much rather see, I don't know how they specifically would do it, but I'd much rather see a metal back, given the great quality of the rest of the build quality of this phone. They do have leather backing options available on the website if you order it separately, and since it's removable, you can of course swap out yourself, but the one it comes with, I'm not too happy with. But I am still very happy that you can swap out the battery, microSD card, and SIM card via the back of the phone. So It's a weird trade-off there. Overall, the phone looks great, is super snappy to use, and a very enjoyable experience to use as well. A weird software thing that bugs the crap out of me is this weather app. Right now it says it's 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Rain will continue until late at night, so you may want to take an umbrella. I can't just say rain or something. It provides decent information, but The LG skin of Android Lollipop here is interesting. I've only really had experience with Samsung's TouchWiz, so this is probably the closest to stock Android I've really spent much time with. My only thing is the weird pages they use, this whole smart bulletin system. I'm not gonna use it, and I wish I could get rid of it, which I'm sure I can if I do some heavier modding, but for basic usage, like having that just by default on my phone is kind of a pain in the butt. But overall, it's super snappy and responsive. I've not had any lag issues. It handles multitasking well. It took the multi-window management from Samsung's phone, or newer phones, in a really good way, and it works really well. I personally don't see the point of it because it's not a computer, but with a screen this high resolution, you can actually pull up 2 windows of apps and do a decent job with both of them. And it handles everything well. I've opened pretty much every app that I could think of that I would use at one time. I can switch between them no problem, and I can, continue using the phone without any major issues, which with 3 gigabytes of RAM, you would definitely hope would happen. Despite how many apps I may have open or anything like that, it's actually very power efficient from what I found too. I've not ran any specific battery tests, but compared to every other phone I've ever used in my entire life, I have left this, the first night that I had it, I had a couple basic apps open. I had like Skype, Twitter, my email, things like that I forgot to close the night before. Put it down with 25% battery, woke up with 20% battery. Perfectly fine. And every time I've laid it down for, to go to sleep, it's barely lost any battery overnight, which is actually really, really cool. My Samsung Galaxy S4 will just die overnight if I leave any sort of apps open. And I've noticed if I do close all the apps, it basically just doesn't drain any power at all, unless I'm getting a ton of notifications and emails and things like that, which is really, really impressive. And this is a weird side note, and I'm sure I'm wrong because I'm sure it'll get hot at some point, but no matter what I've done on this phone, it's never gotten hot to the touch or even like all that warm to the touch, which every other smartphone I've ever used has gotten pretty warm to the touch if you're doing heavy gaming or using a bunch of apps. Or with my S4, for whatever reason, when the battery starts getting low, it gets like 3 times as hot. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but this one has never even gotten all that warm. It's stayed basically the same temperature no matter what I've done on it. And I know that's just a side thing to point out, but it's really nice. Lastly, the camera. Is it a DSLR replacement? My answer is no. Can you use it in place of a DSLR for a lot of photos? Absolutely. And used to, whenever I needed photos for thumbnails, and I just wanted to take it quick without having to set up my whole DSLR setup, I would use my smartphone. And it would honestly take taking quite a few photos to get the right one to really get something that was decent quality. And then by the time I imported it to my computer, it wasn't all that great. With the G4, you have the ability to save as RAW files on top of the manual mode, which gives you basically complete DSLR control over your photo experience. You have aperture settings, ISO settings, which go up super low and super high, shutter speed, manual focus ring, which I was able to do to take some pictures in my mother's garden outside and take some really up close shots and do some really awesome macro and just get the settings just right like I would on my DSLR. And then it still saves it as a RAW file, which I can import back over to my computer and tinker with even more to make a good result. It's extremely handy. But personally, the software, which I feel really weird saying this because I don't see a better alternative, but the software feels way too tedious and just frustrating to try to tinker with all the settings while trying to snap a quick smartphone photo compared to the dials and knobs and manual physical adjustments that you have on a DSLR. So if I'm trying to take a lot of photos really quick while changing settings, this is going to get really frustrating to use. If I'm just trying to take a really good photo real quick with my smartphone, then it's absolutely perfect because sometimes you just need to take one photo and you don't need a full DSLR for it, and it makes it worth it. So would it be a full DSLR replacement? I'd say no, but I will definitely be using it in place of my DSLR for a lot of things. So that's why I say it's kind of weird for me to say that. The 4K video is really good. However, I don't know if it's either the right speeds of the device and the SD card or the potentially variable frame rate sometimes messes with my editing software. But a lot of times if I record for any length of time, it gets pretty out of sync, and that becomes a pretty big problem if I'm going to use the video for editing at all. I gotta say, shooting 4K video with this phone looks absolutely amazing. I was expecting it to be super pixely and just super low quality despite being a high resolution, but it's not. It looks really, really good. For a couple minutes of footage, it was about a gigabyte or so of video files, so keep that in mind for your storage concerns. You will need decent sized SD cards and things like that to actually keep 4K video going, and it can only record up to 5 minutes due to the file size limits of the cards themselves at a time. You can, per video, you can record more than 5 minutes per storage, but you can only record 5 minutes per video. But it works out as long as you plan ahead for that if you're trying to do any lengthy video. Overall, the LG G4 is an absolutely amazing smartphone. I am beyond blown away and impressed with it. I would like to see them at least make attempts to figure out how they might put a front-facing speaker on here. Looking at existing designs, it's kind of hard to picture, but maybe they could integrate it outside the LG logo like the HTC One M9 does. And I would definitely like to try out for myself one of the leather backs or something to see if that, I feel like that might get worn out more, but I want something other than plastic here. I have this amazing just metal glass, awesome build smartphone, and then a piece of plastic on the back that feels like cheap plastic when you start pulling it off. Overall, it's really snappy to use. Their skin isn't too bulky. It's just got some weird nuances about it of Android, and overall, pretty awesome phone. Thanks for watching my review of the LG G4 flagship smartphone for 2015. My name has been Adam Maripos Box. Be sure to check links in the description to our other channels, Patreon campaign where you can support our channel via monthly contribution, check out our sponsor links, things like that. And otherwise, guys, I will see you in the next video. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe.